The job posting appeared on a medical research board at the University of Bologna, buried between requests for pathology assistants and pharmaceutical trial coordinators. Anatomical research position available, Vatican City. Advanced degree in biological sciences required, discretion essential, exceptional compensation. What it didn't mention was that I would be dissecting beings that had once sung hosannas in the presence of God. My name is Dr. Elena Marchetti, and for the past 18 months I have worked in Laboratory Sublevel 7 beneath the Apostolic Palace, studying the physical remains of angels who fell to earth during what the Church officially calls celestial disturbances. I found out about the true nature of the position 3 weeks into what I believed was routine anatomical research on rare specimens. Dr. Cardinal Toretti, the laboratory director, summoned me to his office after I had completed my initial analysis of what I assumed were fossilized remains of an unknown species. "Dr. Marchetti," he said, his thin fingers drumming against his desk, "your preliminary reports demonstrate exceptional attention to detail. You have proven yourself capable of maintaining scientific objectivity under unusual circumstances." He opened a reinforced briefcase and removed a leather portfolio. Inside were 3 documents printed on heavy parchment, each bearing multiple ecclesiastical seals. "These are the laboratory protocols that govern your expanded duties," he explained. "You must memorize them completely before we proceed to Sublevel 7. The first document contained standard safety procedures and anatomical protocols. The second outlined specimen preservation techniques and documentation requirements. The third document contained 3 rules printed in bold red text. Forbidden procedure. 1. Never attempt to remove or examine the crystalline structures located in the cardiac region. These formations must remain intact during all examinations. Forbidden procedure 2. Do not expose any specimen to direct electromagnetic fields or high-frequency sound waves. Such exposure has proven catastrophically dangerous. Forbidden procedure 3. Under no circumstances should you attempt to extract or analyze the luminescent fluid found in the specimen's neural pathways. This substance requires containment protocols beyond our current capabilities. Dr. Toretti made me read each forbidden procedure aloud 3 times before continuing. These restrictions exist because previous researchers who violated them experienced consequences that forced us to relocate the entire laboratory facility. He led me through a series of security checkpoints deeper into the Vatican than I knew existed. Sublevel 7 required 3 separate key cards, retinal scanning, and verification from 2 different church officials. The laboratory itself was unlike any medical facility I had ever seen. Climate-controlled examination rooms lined a central corridor, each equipped with specialized ventilation systems and containment protocols. The lighting was soft and indirect, designed to minimize electromagnetic interference. The specimens arrive through separate channels, Dr. Toretti explained as we walked. Sometimes they are recovered from sites where unexplained phenomena have been reported. Other times they are delivered by church officials who prefer not to discuss the circumstances of recovery. My first assignment was a complete anatomical survey of specimen A47, which had been in storage for approximately 6 months. Dr. Toretti provided me with a detailed protocol sheet and emphasized the importance of following procedures exactly. The examination room was sterile and temperature-controlled. When I opened the containment unit, I understood immediately why the position required advanced degrees and exceptional compensation. The specimen measured approximately 2 meters in length and possessed anatomical features that defied conventional biological classification. The skeletal structure was humanoid, but composed of a material that appeared to be crystallized bone with metallic properties. The preserved tissue showed signs of cellular organization, unlike anything in terrestrial biology. Most remarkably, the specimen retained what appeared to be remnants of wings. The wing structures were partially decomposed, but showed evidence of a membrane system supported by hollow bones, similar to those found in large birds, scaled up to accommodate a human-sized torso. I spent the first week conducting external examinations and photographic documentation. The specimen's bone density was approximately 3 times that of normal human bone, yet the overall body weight was surprisingly light. X-ray analysis revealed internal structures that seemed to serve functions I could only theorize about. The most intriguing feature was a series of what appeared to be organ systems located throughout the torso that had no earthly equivalent. These structures were connected by a network of pathways that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light, suggesting some form of bioluminescent circulatory system. During my second week, I began internal examinations. The preservation techniques used by previous researchers had maintained tissue integrity remarkably well. I was able to identify what appeared to be a cardiovascular system, though it operated on principles entirely different from mammalian circulation. The cardiac region contained the crystalline structures mentioned in Forbidden Procedure 1. These formations were approximately the size of human hearts, but composed of a translucent material that seemed to store and conduct energy. They pulsed faintly when exposed to certain wavelengths of light. I documented their external appearance and electrical properties without attempting removal or invasive examination. The readings I obtained suggested these structures had once processed energy at levels far beyond normal biological requirements. The neural tissue was equally fascinating and disturbing. The brain structure was larger than human brains and contained additional regions that served unknown functions. Most remarkably, the neural pathways were filled with a luminescent fluid that maintained its glow even in preserved tissue. This fluid was the substance referenced in Forbidden Procedure 3. It appeared to be some form of cerebrospinal fluid, but with properties that seemed to bridge the gap between biological and quantum mechanical systems. Simple spectral analysis suggested it contained elements not found on the periodic table. Following protocol, I documented the fluid's presence and properties without attempting extraction or detailed analysis. The equipment required for such procedures was not available in our laboratory, and Dr. Toretti had been explicit about the dangers of unauthorized investigation. 3 weeks into my examination of specimen A47, I experienced my first encounter with the restriction's practical applications. While conducting routine tissue analysis, a power surge caused the laboratory's electromagnetic shielding to fluctuate briefly. The specimen's crystalline cardiac structures began resonating at a frequency that caused all metal instruments in the room to vibrate. The luminescent neural fluid began glowing more brightly, and I heard what could only be described as harmonic tones emanating from the specimen itself. I immediately activated the emergency containment protocols and evacuated the examination room. Dr. Toretti arrived within minutes, accompanied by 2 technicians carrying specialized equipment. "What exactly happened?" he asked, while the technicians restored the electromagnetic shielding. I described the power surge and the specimen's response. Dr. Toretti nodded gravely. "This is precisely why Forbidden Procedure 2 exists," he explained. "These specimens retain residual sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. Uncontrolled exposure can trigger responses that we are not equipped to handle safely." The technicians spent 2 hours recalibrating the laboratory's systems before declaring the area secure for resumed operations. The specimen had returned to its normal state, but the incident had demonstrated the very real dangers involved in this work. After completing my analysis of specimen A47, Dr. Toretti assigned me to a more challenging case. Specimen A52, which had been recovered only weeks earlier and showed signs of more recent biological activity. This specimen was smaller than a 47, but appeared to be in better condition. The preservation process had maintained more of the original tissue structure, providing an opportunity to study the specimen's biological systems in greater detail. The most significant difference was that specimen A52's luminescent neural fluid remained active. The pathways throughout the brain tissue continued to glow and pulse in patterns that suggested ongoing neural activity despite the specimen's apparent death. This presented both an opportunity for unprecedented research and a significant safety challenge. The active neural fluid was exactly the substance referenced in Forbidden Procedure 3, and its continued activity made it even more dangerous to study directly. I developed modified examination techniques that allowed me to observe and document the neural activity without attempting to extract or analyze the fluid directly. Using specialized cameras and monitoring equipment, I was able to record the patterns of neural activity over several weeks. The patterns were unlike anything in terrestrial neuroscience. The neural fluid flowed through the specimen's brain tissue in complex cycles that seemed to follow mathematical principles rather than biological ones. The timing and intensity of the pulses suggested some form of information processing was continuing even in death. Most remarkably, the patterns seemed to respond to external stimuli. When I played classical music in the examination room, the neural activity increased in complexity and began synchronizing with the musical rhythms. When I introduced religious music, specifically Gregorian chants, the response was even more pronounced. This discovery led me to wonder whether the specimens retained some form of consciousness or awareness, even in their preserved state. The implications were both fascinating and deeply disturbing. During my 4th month in the laboratory, Dr. Toretti introduced me to the most challenging case yet. Specimen A55, which had been recovered from a site in northern Italy where multiple witnesses had reported seeing a great light fall from the sky, followed by several days of unexplained phenomena. This specimen was different from the others in several critical ways. First, it appeared to have died much more recently, possibly within weeks of recovery. Second, the preservation process had been less successful, leaving several organ systems in a state of partial decay that made examination more difficult. Most significantly, specimen A55 retained fully intact wing structures that showed signs of having been functional until very recently. The wings were magnificent and terrifying, spanning nearly 4 meters when fully extended and composed of a membrane system that seemed to combine organic and crystalline elements. The wing structures contained their own network of luminescent pathways connected to the main neural system. When I examined them under specialized lighting, they revealed patterns of extraordinary complexity and beauty. The membrane itself was translucent and contained what appeared to be thousands of microscopic structures that might have provided lift and control during flight. Dr. Toretti was particularly interested in my analysis of the wing systems, but he emphasized the importance of maintaining our standard safety protocols during the examination. This specimen represents our best opportunity to understand the physiological basis of angelic flight, he explained. However, it also presents the greatest risk of accidental protocol violation. The wing systems remain partially active and extremely sensitive to external stimulation. Indeed, the wings would occasionally twitch or flutter slightly during examination, particularly when exposed to certain frequencies of light or sound. These movements were subtle but unmistakable, suggesting that some muscle and nervous system function remained active even in death. The most challenging aspect of examining specimen A55 was the temptation to violate the forbidden procedures. The crystalline cardiac structures were larger and more complex than those in previous specimens, and they pulsed with visible energy patterns. The luminescent neural fluid was not only active, but seemed to flow in response to my presence in the examination room. Several times during my work with this specimen, I found myself considering whether controlled violations of the forbidden procedures might yield crucial scientific insights. The restrictions prevented me from conducting the exact analyses that might answer the most important questions about these beings' nature and origin. However, Dr. Toretti's warnings about the consequences of protocol violations, combined with my own observations of the specimen's residual activity, convinced me to maintain strict adherence to the established procedures. The turning point came during my 6th month in the laboratory. I was conducting routine documentation of specimen A55 when I noticed unusual activity in the neural pathways. The luminescent fluid was flowing more rapidly than usual, and the patterns seemed more complex and organized. As I observed the phenomenon, I began to hear something that defied rational explanation. It was barely audible at first, but gradually became clear. Harmonized tones that seemed to emanate from the specimen itself. The sound was unlike anything produced by normal biological processes, but it was unmistakably musical. The tones continued for approximately 20 minutes, during which the entire specimen seemed to become more active. The wing structures moved slightly, the crystalline cardiac structures pulsed more brightly, and the neural pathways throughout the body increased their luminescent activity. I documented everything as thoroughly as possible while maintaining appropriate distance and safety protocols. The experience was both scientifically fascinating and emotionally overwhelming. For 20 minutes, I felt as though I was in the presence of something that had once been truly divine. When the activity subsided, specimen A55 returned to its normal state of partial activity. I completed my documentation and immediately reported the incident to Dr. Toretti. This type of spontaneous activity occurs occasionally, he explained when I described the event. We believe it represents some form of residual spiritual energy that persists even after physical death. Your documentation of this incident will be valuable for our ongoing research. He paused and studied my report carefully. However, I must emphasize that such experiences can be emotionally challenging for research staff. The Church provides counseling services for laboratory personnel who find this work psychologically difficult. I assured him that I was managing the emotional aspects of the work successfully, though privately I had to admit that the experience had affected me more profoundly than I had expected. Over the following months, I continued my research with increasing sophistication and understanding. I developed new documentation techniques that allowed for more detailed analysis while maintaining safety protocols. I collaborated with other researchers to compare findings across different specimens and identify common characteristics. The work began to reveal patterns that suggested these beings had possessed physiological capabilities far beyond anything found in terrestrial biology. Their energy processing systems, neural complexity, and apparent ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields placed them in a category of existence that bridged the gap between biological and spiritual phenomena. Most remarkably, I began to understand that the forbidden procedures were not arbitrary restrictions, but essential safety measures based on previous research disasters. Dr. Toretti gradually shared more details about the incidents that had led to the establishment of these protocols. 7 years ago, a researcher attempted to extract the luminescent neural fluid for detailed analysis, he explained during one of our regular briefings. The extraction process triggered a response that contaminated the entire laboratory with some form of spiritual energy. 3 researchers were hospitalized with symptoms that defied medical explanation, and the affected areas of the Vatican required months of blessing and purification before they could be safely occupied again. Similar incidents had occurred when researchers had attempted to remove the crystalline cardiac structures or expose specimens to high-energy electromagnetic fields. Each violation of the forbidden procedures had resulted in phenomena that the Church classified as supernatural emergencies, requiring intervention by specially trained clergy. The specimens may appear to be simply preserved biological remains, Dr. Toretti continued, but they retain connections to spiritual dimensions that we do not fully understand. The forbidden procedures exist to prevent accidental breaches between our physical research environment and those other dimensions. This explanation helped me understand why the work required not just scientific expertise, but also psychological stability and spiritual preparation. We were studying beings that existed at the intersection of multiple realities, and our research necessarily involved contact with forces beyond normal human experience. During my first year in the laboratory, I assisted with the recovery and initial examination of 3 new specimens. Each recovery required coordination with church officials, specialized transportation, and immediate implementation of containment procedures. The recovery sites were invariably locations where unusual phenomena had been reported. Unexplained lights, harmonic sounds, temporary alterations in local gravity or electromagnetic fields. The Church maintained a network of investigators who responded to such reports and determined which incidents required scientific follow-up. Specimen A58 was recovered from a mountainous area of Switzerland where hikers had reported seeing a figure with wings that had apparently died after falling from a great height. The local authorities had cordoned off the area after several witnesses reported experiencing religious visions when approaching the body. The specimen showed evidence of severe trauma, presumably from impact with the rocky terrain. However, the injuries revealed additional anatomical details that had been difficult to observe in better preserved specimens. The bone structure was even more complex than I had previously realized, with internal chambers and passages that seemed designed to channel energy throughout the skeletal system. The wing attachment points showed evidence of muscle and tendon systems that could have generated enormous mechanical power for flight. Most intriguingly, the traumatic damage had exposed portions of the internal organ systems that were normally difficult to examine. I was able to observe the connections between the luminescent neural pathways and the crystalline cardiac structures, revealing an integrated energy processing system of extraordinary sophistication. Specimen A59 presented different challenges. It had been recovered from a site in rural France where an entire village had reported experiencing angelic visitations for 3 consecutive nights. On the 4th morning, local clergy had found the specimen in the village church, apparently having died peacefully during the night. This specimen showed no signs of trauma or distress. The preservation was excellent, and all physiological systems appeared to have ceased function gradually rather than suddenly. The luminescent neural fluid was still active, flowing in slow, regular patterns that suggested a peaceful transition from life to death. The villagers' reports suggested that this specimen had interacted with humans during its final days of life. Multiple witnesses described conversations with an angel of magnificent beauty who had provided comfort and spiritual guidance during a difficult period for the community. If these reports were accurate, they suggested that the specimens I was studying had possessed not only extraordinary physiological capabilities, but also consciousness, intelligence, and the ability to communicate with humans on complex emotional and spiritual levels. The implications were staggering. I was not simply examining the remains of unknown biological entities, but studying the physical remnants of beings that had possessed wisdom, compassion, and direct knowledge of spiritual realities beyond human comprehension. Dr. Toretti confirmed that such interactions were not unprecedented. These beings have been appearing to humans throughout history, he explained. The Church has documented thousands of such encounters over the centuries. However, in recent decades, an increasing number have been dying shortly after their earthly appearances. He showed me historical records dating back several centuries, describing similar recoveries and examinations. The Church had been studying these specimens for much longer than I had realized, gradually developing the protocols and procedures that now governed our work. The increase in specimen recoveries correlates with increased human technological development, Dr. Toretti continued. We believe that electromagnetic pollution and other aspects of modern civilization may be making extended earthly existence more difficult for these beings. This revelation added another dimension to the work. We were not just studying extraordinary biological specimens, but documenting the effects of human technological development on celestial beings. Our research had implications for understanding humanity's impact on spiritual as well as physical environments. During my 2nd year in the laboratory, I was promoted to senior researcher and given responsibility for developing new examination techniques and protocols. My experience with the existing procedures, combined with my observations of specimen behavior, qualified me to help improve the laboratory's capabilities while maintaining essential safety restrictions. I developed new imaging techniques that allowed for more detailed documentation of internal structures without invasive procedures. I created protocols for monitoring specimen activity over extended periods, providing insight into the long-term behavior of the luminescent neural systems. Most importantly, I worked with Dr. Toretti to train new researchers joining the laboratory staff. The work required not just technical expertise, but psychological preparation and spiritual understanding. New staff members needed to understand that they were working at the intersection of science and divine mystery. Training new researchers also reinforced my own understanding of the forbidden procedure's importance. Each new staff member needed to learn why the restrictions existed and what consequences could result from protocol violations. The training process required me to articulate the spiritual and practical dangers involved in this work. One particularly challenging case involved Dr. Alessandro Ricci, a biochemist from the University of Rome who had been recruited for his expertise in analyzing complex organic compounds. Dr. Ricci was an excellent scientist but had difficulty accepting the restrictions that prevented him from conducting the chemical analyses he considered essential to understanding the specimens. These limitations compromise the scientific validity of our research, he argued during one of our training sessions. How can we claim to understand these organisms without detailed analysis of their biochemical composition? I explained that the forbidden procedures existed to prevent catastrophic incidents, but Dr. Ricci remained skeptical. He believed that proper scientific methodology required complete analysis regardless of potential risks. The situation came to a head during Dr. Ricci's third week in the laboratory. While I was conducting routine documentation of specimen A62, he attempted to extract a small sample of the luminescent neural fluid for unauthorized analysis. The moment his extraction needle penetrated the neural pathway, specimen A62 responded with immediate and dramatic activity. The crystalline cardiac structures began resonating at frequencies that shattered several pieces of glassware. The luminescent pathways throughout the specimen began glowing with intense brightness, and the wing structures began moving with coordinated, purposeful motion. Most alarmingly, the entire laboratory was filled with harmonic tones that seemed to emanate not just from the specimen, but from the building structure itself. Equipment throughout Sublevel 7 began malfunctioning, and several other specimens in different examination rooms began showing signs of sympathetic activation. I immediately activated the emergency containment protocols and ordered Dr. Ricci to cease his extraction attempt. However, removing the needle from the neural pathway seemed to intensify rather than reduce the specimen's response. Dr. Toretti arrived within minutes, accompanied by 2 Vatican clergy who I had never seen before. The clergy began what appeared to be a blessing or purification ritual, while the technicians worked to restore the laboratory's electromagnetic shielding. The crisis lasted for nearly 2 hours. During that time, specimen A62 remained in a state of extreme activation, and the harmonic tones continued to affect equipment throughout the facility. Several other specimens showed signs of increased neural activity, suggesting some form of communication or resonance between them. When the situation finally stabilized, specimen A62 had suffered significant damage to its neural pathways. The unauthorized extraction had disrupted the flow of luminescent fluid, and several sections of the neural network had ceased functioning entirely. Dr. Ricci was immediately removed from the laboratory and transferred to other duties within the Vatican. His brief violation of Forbidden Procedure 3 had permanently damaged an irreplaceable specimen and created a security emergency that required intervention by specialized church officials. This incident demonstrates exactly why the forbidden procedures cannot be modified or violated under any circumstances, Dr. Toretti explained during the post-incident briefing. Dr. Ricci's extraction attempt created a connection between our physical laboratory and spiritual dimensions that we are not equipped to handle safely. The clergy, who had responded to the emergency, provided additional context. According to their explanation, the specimens maintained connections to celestial realms even after death. Unauthorized procedures could weaken the barriers between dimensions, potentially allowing spiritual entities or energies to manifest in our physical environment. The incident reinforced my commitment to maintaining strict protocol adherence and helped me understand that the forbidden procedures protected not just laboratory safety, but the stability of reality itself within the Vatican. Following the incident with Dr. Ricci, I was assigned to review and update the laboratory's training procedures. Dr. Toretti wanted to ensure that future researchers understood both the scientific and spiritual implications of the work before beginning hands-on examination of specimens. I developed a comprehensive orientation program that included not just technical training, but also theological education about the nature of angelic beings and their relationship to physical reality. New researchers needed to understand that they were working with remains of creatures that had existed primarily in spiritual dimensions while possessing the ability to manifest physically. The training program also emphasized the historical context of the Church's research into these beings. For centuries, the Catholic Church had documented angelic encounters while developing theological understanding of celestial hierarchy and divine intervention in human affairs. Our modern scientific examination of angelic remains represented a continuation of that historical investigation using contemporary research methods. However, the fundamental mysteries remained unchanged. We were studying beings whose existence transcended the boundaries between physical and spiritual reality. During my third year in the laboratory, I was given access to the Vatican's complete archives of angelic encounter documentation. These records provided context for understanding the specimens I was examining and helped me develop more sophisticated hypotheses about their physiological capabilities. The archives contained detailed accounts of angelic appearances throughout human history, including descriptions of their physical characteristics, abilities, and interactions with human societies. Many of the accounts described beings whose physical features matched those I had observed in the laboratory specimens. Historical records from the Middle Ages described angels with translucent wing structures, luminescent internal systems, and the ability to appear and disappear at will. Renaissance accounts included detailed artistic representations that showed anatomical features remarkably similar to those documented in my research. More recent reports from the 19th and 20th centuries provided increasingly detailed descriptions of angelic physiology, including references to internal light sources and harmonic vocalizations that corresponded directly to my laboratory observations. The archival research revealed that the Church had been conducting systematic investigation of angelic phenomena for much longer than the current laboratory program. Medieval scholars had developed theological frameworks for understanding celestial beings that paralleled my scientific observations about energy processing and dimensional interface capabilities. This historical perspective helped me understand that my work represented the latest phase of humanity's ongoing relationship with angelic beings, using modern scientific methods to investigate mysteries that had fascinated theologians and philosophers for centuries. The combination of historical documentation and contemporary scientific analysis began to reveal patterns that suggested these beings served specific functions in maintaining connections between spiritual and physical realities. Their presence in human history appeared to correlate with periods of significant spiritual or cultural development. During my fourth year in the laboratory, I was assigned to lead a comprehensive analysis of all specimens recovered over the previous decade. This project required me to identify common characteristics, document variations between individual specimens, and develop hypotheses about the broader patterns of angelic presence in contemporary human society. The analysis revealed several significant trends. First, the frequency of specimen recoveries had increased dramatically over the past 50 years, with particularly sharp increases during periods of global crisis or transformation. Second, the specimens showed evidence of adaptation to changing environmental conditions on Earth. More recent specimens possessed modified respiratory systems and enhanced electromagnetic shielding, suggesting evolutionary responses to industrial pollution and technological interference. Third, the specimen's physical characteristics varied in ways that suggested specialized functions or roles within celestial hierarchy. Some specimens possessed features optimized for rapid flight and long-distance travel, while others showed anatomical specialization for extended interaction with human societies. Most intriguingly, the most recently recovered specimens showed evidence of what appeared to be technological integration. Their crystalline cardiac structures contained materials that seemed to interface with human electronic systems, and their neural pathways included elements that resembled biological computing networks. This technological integration suggested that angelic beings were adapting to human technological development by incorporating complementary capabilities into their own physiology. They appeared to be evolving alongside human civilization rather than remaining static throughout history. The implications were profound. If angelic beings were actively adapting to human technological progress, it suggested an ongoing relationship between celestial and human development that transcended simple religious encounters. My comprehensive analysis culminated in a report that Dr. Toretti described as groundbreaking for the field of angelic studies. The document provided the first systematic scientific framework for understanding these beings' physiological capabilities and their relationship to human civilization. However, the report also raised disturbing questions about why increasing numbers of angels were dying during earthly manifestations. The trend suggested that something about contemporary human civilization was making extended angelic presence physically unsustainable. Dr. Toretti shared my concerns about this trend. The increasing frequency of recoveries suggests that these beings are making greater efforts to interact with human society despite the risks to their own survival, he explained. Your analysis indicates that they may be trying to provide guidance or assistance during a critical period in human development. The possibility that angels were sacrificing their lives to maintain contact with humanity during a crucial historical moment added urgency to our research. We were not simply studying biological curiosities, but documenting the final messages of beings who had chosen death over abandonment of their mission to help human civilization. This realization transformed my understanding of the work's importance. Each specimen represented not just a scientific opportunity, but a record of sacrifice and dedication that deserved the highest levels of respect and care. As I completed my 5th year in the Vatican's angel dissection laboratory, I reflected on how profoundly the work had changed my understanding of science, spirituality, and the relationship between physical and divine realities. The forbidden procedures that had initially seemed like arbitrary restrictions had revealed themselves to be essential safeguards protecting both human researchers and the integrity of the specimens themselves. Following these protocols had allowed me to conduct meaningful research while maintaining respect for the spiritual significance of the beings I studied. Most importantly, the work had taught me that scientific investigation and spiritual reverence were not contradictory approaches to understanding divine mysteries. The most profound insights had come from combining rigorous scientific methodology with deep respect for the sacred nature of the specimens. The 3 forbidden procedures continued to govern all aspects of laboratory work, and my experience had confirmed their absolute necessity. Forbidden Procedure 1. Protected the crystalline cardiac structures that maintained connections to celestial energy sources. Violating this restriction risked triggering responses that could destabilize the boundary between physical and spiritual dimensions. Forbidden Procedure 2. Prevented electromagnetic interference that could activate residual angelic capabilities in ways that laboratory containment systems could not handle safely. Forbidden Procedure 3. Maintained the integrity of the luminescent neural fluid that preserved residual consciousness and memory within the specimens. Unauthorized analysis of this substance could release spiritual energies beyond human ability to control or contain. These restrictions had enabled 5 years of productive research that expanded human understanding of angelic physiology while maintaining appropriate boundaries between scientific investigation and spiritual mystery. My work in Sub-Level 7 had revealed that angels were not abstract spiritual entities, but complex beings capable of physical manifestation through sophisticated energy processing systems. Their deaths during earthly appearances represented genuine sacrifice, as they abandoned the safety of celestial dimensions to provide guidance during humanity's most challenging historical periods. The laboratory's research had documented this sacrifice with scientific precision, creating a record of angelic dedication that would serve both scientific and theological understanding for generations to come. Dr. Toretti had recently informed me that the Vatican was planning to expand the laboratory program to include additional research facilities in other locations around the world. The increasing frequency of angelic manifestations and recoveries required enhanced capabilities for immediate response and specimen preservation. Your experience and expertise will be essential for establishing new laboratories and training international research teams, he explained. The Church recognizes that this phenomenon requires global coordination and standardized protocols. The prospect of sharing this work with researchers worldwide was both exciting and daunting. The protocols and procedures I had helped develop would need to be adapted for different cultural and institutional contexts while maintaining the essential spiritual safeguards that made the research possible. As I prepared to take on expanded responsibilities within the Church's Angelic Research Program, I remained grateful for the opportunity to contribute to humanity's understanding of divine intervention in physical reality. The work had taught me that the boundaries between science and spirituality were far more permeable than conventional academic training suggested. The most profound truths about existence lay at the intersection of rigorous investigation and humble reverence for mysteries beyond human comprehension. My name is Dr. Elena Marchetti, and I work in the Vatican's Angel Dissection Laboratory, where I study the physical remains of celestial beings who died while trying to guide humanity through our most crucial historical period. The 3 forbidden procedures continue to protect both researchers and specimens from consequences that could affect the stability of reality itself. The work continues, governed by protocols that serve purposes far greater than laboratory safety, maintained by people willing to follow restrictions that preserve the sacred within the scientific. And every day I am reminded that the most important discoveries come not from what we can analyze and dissect, but from what we choose to protect and preserve in the face of infinite mystery.